Good evening. My name is Tim Davis, and I'm the Deputy Great Salt Lake Commissioner. I want to welcome you to the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan Draft Work Plan Open House. Let me start by sharing a few words about why this planning effort is important. A plan for the entire Great Salt Lake Basin is essential for the long-term health of the Great Salt Lake and the ecosystems and the people who rely upon it. After all, our communities, the economy, land, health, water use, are all connected. And additionally, we cannot simply plan for the lake without planning for the watersheds and the river basins that are all connected through and to the lake. This planning effort will also develop tools that are critical for the implementation of the Great Salt Lake Strategic Plan that the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office is currently developing and that will be finalized early next year. And tonight's open house and the public comments we receive on the draft work plan will help us make sure that we are developing the right tools to ensure that we have a resilient water supply for the Great Salt Lake and the entire basin. Tonight's agenda, after me, Candice Hasenyager, the Director of the Division of Water Resources, will go over the origin of the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan. Then Laura Vernon, the Great Salt Lake Basin Planner with the Division of Water Resources, will go over the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan Draft Work Plan. It is a mouthful. Then there will be a panel moderated by Candice Hasenyager with myself, Tim Hawks with the Great Salt Lake Brine Shrimp Cooperative, Trevor Nielsen with the Bear River Canal Company, Rick Baxter with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Marcelle Shoop with the National Audubon Society, and Jacob Young with the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. Finally, there'll be time for a discussion and questions and question and answer session. If you would like to submit a question, there will be a QR code that you will need to download in order to submit those questions. So with that, I'll hand this over to Candice. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tim. I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight, and I really appreciate you taking the time, to our panelists, and for all of you online to kind of cover this really important subject. So as Tim mentioned, I'll be covering some background on where this planning effort came from, and then Laura will be diving into the work plan. So we'll get going here. So when we think about the Great Salt Lake Basin, we know a couple of things. One, it's extremely large, and we know it's extremely complex. And so one of the analogies that we love to use is kind of thinking about building a puzzle, right? You lay out all the pieces, you get all the edges lined up, and then you're really excited as you start filling it in. And then maybe sometimes you've ever gotten to the end of the puzzle and like, oh, we're missing some things. We're missing some pieces. And so this is a bit like the Great Salt Lake Basin. We know a lot about the Great Salt Lake Basin. We know a lot about the water supply and the uses. Oh, thanks, Tim. No, you're great. But then there are some things that we don't know as much about, especially about how, the systems maybe aren't always connected. Maybe we don't quite understand the exact connection between the water supply, the surface water supply, and the groundwater. Maybe there are lots of various basins within the Great Salt Lake Basin, and maybe we don't have one overarching connected model. So we think that there's some really important pieces that we need to fill in, and that's really the purpose of the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, is really to connect all of the basins and all the pieces to get a great understanding of all the work that's being done, because a lot of work is being done within the Great Salt Lake Basin, and really trying to synthesize that and bring that together. So just a little bit of background on where this came from. So long ago in 2022, it was like so last year, right? We had the HB 429 passed, which is called the Great Salt Lake Watershed Integrated Water Assessment. And so this was an effort to really identify and evaluate all the best management practices that may be used to create a reliable water supply. And $5 million was also appropriated with that. And then at the same time, the Division Water Resources applied for a U.S. Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Basin study specifically geared toward Great Salt Lake. And so we've been able to combine these two efforts into what we're now calling the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, with a total appropriation of $8.1 million between the state appropriation and the Bureau of Reclamation grant. So one of the first things that we did when we got together, we created, and Laura will go into this, but some steering committee and an advisory work group, was really to understand the challenge of what we're facing. And so I love this and thought it was well put together, so I'm just going to read this. So the challenge is ensuring a resilient water supply requires extraordinary vision and collaborative effort. Solutions remain socially and technically complex as demands on this limited resource continue to increase. Today's water management decisions shape tomorrow's possibility. And so when we think about that challenge, there are, the two main complexities. One, the social complexity. We have a lot of people, and people often think different ways. Maybe not everyone agrees. There's also challenges with awareness. I feel like as we've seen more urbanization happen, people are more disconnected from where their water comes from. Most of us are lucky enough to just go and turn on our tap in the morning and have water come out and don't realize what it takes to actually make that happen. There's organizational and institutional challenges, legal challenges, and then on the technical side of things, there's water supply complexity and where the water comes from, water management decisions of, when water gets stored or released, water rights, play into that. There's also land management complexities with how people make land use decisions. Do we build single-family homes? Do we build multifamily homes? Quantification and environmental challenges also make it complex. So the goal that both the steering committee and the advisory work group landed on is the goal of this plan is to ensure a resilient water supply for Great Salt Lake and all water uses, including people and the environment throughout the watershed. So we really looked throughout this last year as we've been working to develop this work plan on an integrated approach and really trying to understand how can we build a resilient water supply for the Great Salt Lake and its basins. And it's a really important question and one that this plan needs to grapple with and address. And then we kind of look at the other specific questions regarding water supply, water demand, water quality, watersheds, stormwater, and the needs of Great Salt Lake. And so these are all will be addressed through the implementing the work plan that we will see in the next several years. One of the things that's really important to note about our Great Salt Lake Basin is it's a really interconnected system, and they all relate to each other, right? So from the rainfall coming, the snow coming in the mountains, I got a bunch last week, so I was super excited about that at my house, and then the runoff that comes down and enters reservoirs, conveyance systems, we use the water, then it goes into water treatment plants, and then, that effluent is that treated effluent is then discharged into Great Salt Lake, and then Great Salt Lake has its own demands on that system. So we really need to understand this overarching system and how everything's interconnected. One of the other things that's really important about this basin plan is to develop partnerships. As I mentioned, there's lots of people working on Great Salt Lake issues, and there's a lot of interconnections that we need to continue to make and incorporate as we go through this process. And there's lots of activities. Oh my goodness, so much stuff going on Great Salt Lake. Whether you're thinking about the USGS Saline Lakes Ecosystem Integrated Water Availability Assessment, the Great Salt Lake Comprehensive Management Plan, or the Great Salt Lake groundwater model that USGS is doing. What is the work of the advisory council? There's a lot going on, the trust. So how can we ensure that all of these efforts are kind of moving in the same direction? And we think that the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan is really an important avenue to help move all those activities along and will help create a resilient water supply. So that's it for me, but I'm excited to turn it over to Laura Vernon, who will talk and give some more details about the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan draft work plan.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us out in virtual world, and those of you who are here in the room tonight. As Candice said, my name is Laura Vernon. I'm the Great Salt Lake Basin Planner with the Division of Water Resources, and I just wanted to take a minute to talk to you about the work plan that we have developed for the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan. This is basically the plan for the plan. It sounds kind of crazy, but I think it's a good way to wrap our head around the enormousness of this project. It was so big, the legislature requested in the bill that we develop kind of a guidance on how we were going to create this plan. And so how do we meet the challenges that Candice outlined, and how do we get where we need to go instead of feeling isolated out on the middle of a frosty Great Salt Lake in the middle of winter? Well, you start with this work plan. So this diagram, or this figure, is a good illustration of some of the activities that have been going on, and it breaks the activities down into two sections, the people part and the technical part. So I'll start off talking a little bit about the people part. Over the last 6 months, we've done a lot with regard to stakeholder involvement, and we will continue to do this throughout the basin plan itself, but I just wanted to let you know about what's going on. We started with a situational assessment, and before I go any further, I did want to give a shout out to the consultants that have been helping us with this. They were key in conducting the situational assessment, but Jacobs was the firm that we contracted with to help us, and they had subcontractors, the Langdon Group and Clyde Snow and Sessions. So without them, this would have been an even more challenging project. So cheers to you guys. The Langdon Group reached out to over 55 individuals, and just to kind of get an idea, capture the feel, the concerns, the issues that are that all of the different stakeholders face in the Great Salt Lake Basin. We held focus groups with different stakeholders, water quality, U.S. Forest Service, trying to find out what the issues were in the watershed. As Candice mentioned, the advisory group and the steering committee helped identify the challenge and shape the goal where we're headed. And these are going to be two important groups that are vital in moving us along. The advisory group consists of state and federal partners, so the Division of Wildlife, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, who is a co-lead in this, the Army Corps of Engineers. So they're kind of setting the sidebars, the parameters about what is feasible, possible from law, policy perspective, practical perspective. And then we have a steering committee that is comprised of 21 individuals throughout the watershed. They include ag representatives, municipalities, state and federal, others, blanking on some of the groups, but an array, some of the industry folks from both in the lake and up in the basin. So you have an array of people who are all kind of helping us to identify what the issues are as we move along in the plan. And then we also have the technical piece of this puzzle. And as Candice talked about the kind of building blocks earlier, the water supply, demand issues, we took those building blocks into account and tried to come up with as many questions as we could to help understand how to make sure Great Salt Lake gets all of the water that it needs, how we can better understand the water supply and demand issues. So coming up with a question hierarchy for some of the most important issues. We did a literature review, collected all of the information on existing models, data, and tools that the other river basins are using when they're doing their current water budgets. We did interviews and workshops with those technical groups. And then kind of the crux of the work plan was the development of this gap analysis. So what are the missing puzzle pieces that Candice showed earlier? What are the missing pieces that we need to put the puzzle together to understand how to ensure a resilient water supply for Great Salt Lake? And how can we do that within the time and budget that we have allotted to us, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. And then we took all of those questions based on the criteria, timing, funding, who is doing what work already, what is projected to be done in the future, and we did a prioritization and came up with a list of projects that we are recommending for future work. And at the end of the work plan is this is what I'm thinking of as my medal. So this is the medal or my badge that kind of outlines what the next steps are in the integrated plan. And in the middle of my medal is the decision-making track. So this is really the core of the Basin plan. It's where a lot of the data modeling, scenario planning is going to take place. It's where the bulk of the effort will take place. But all the while we're doing that, we're going to look at some strategic research opportunities, capacity development, explore policy opportunities, and some solution development ideas. I'll explain a bit more about those. As you may have gleaned, this project is not going to happen overnight. It's so large and complex. We're going to need some time. We wish we had started on this effort several years ago, but we're here now and we're ready to get to work. As I said, in 2023, we have spent developing the work plan. Now we're going to start creating the models, developing some scenarios, evaluating those scenarios, coming up with strategies and tactics, best management practices, and evaluating kind of what the trade-offs are going to be for those scenarios, and then recommend some suggestions moving forward to ensure a resilient water supply. And all the while doing that, I think one of the most important efforts that we can do is to continue to make these connections with the people who are making decisions, who are working in the watershed, who know it best, and also just to understand what people's concerns are and to develop a shared understanding of what people's concerns are, helping people understand and come together around this issue that connects us all. We're all in this together, and so I think just kind of shaping that concept and kind of bringing people along and talking to people throughout the process is going to be crucial. So here's a more detailed look at my medal. As I said, the crux of it, or the bulk of it, is this decision-making track, and I'll just kind of explore some of those, and then I'll talk a little bit about the projects that are in the outer circle of the medal, some of the potential projects. So with this integrated collaborative approach, we've got our core team of people that we're going to be working with over the next 3 years. So we'll be working with Deputy Director Tim Davis here and Commissioner Brian Steed. They're providing the oversight and guidance as we work through this process. The Division of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation are co-leading the work. And then as we start to get into the details of each of the river basins, we'll create water budgets, work with the existing water budgets that there are, build upon those, make sure that all of our data is coming in as apples to apples. So the Jordan River Basin numbers look similar to the Weber River Basin numbers. So we have, working with all of these water budgets, we will be connecting each of those, the river basins to the watershed councils. And I'm not sure if you're all aware, but a couple of years ago, the Utah Watersheds Council Act passed, and that formed watershed councils that are conveniently located in the river basins for this basin management plan. So we were really excited for the opportunity to have the folks that are in these Bear River watershed councils really be the touch point that we're, as we're moving forward, working on water budgets. They're kind of, you can access through the watershed councils and really get the idea, the process, the timelines. I'll be coming and updating people and gathering information, getting your questions, possibly running scenarios that some of the river basin watershed councils are interested in. So I really think kind of working on these connections with the river basin water budgets and the watershed councils is going to be an important piece as we move on the next couple of years. And moving along, maybe, uh-oh, wouldn't you know it? Paul? Would you go grab Paul? Just if we could pause for a moment. Oh. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're still good. Let's see. Go back. Ay. Yep. We're all good. All right. So, like I said, the center of this medallion is the decision or the data, the decision-making track, but central to that is the development of or gathering all of the data for each of the river basins will be housed in a central database. And like I said, we'll be making sure all of that data can talk to each other. So apples to apples data, not apples to orange data. And we'd like to work on gathering the data and then creating models. Simultaneously, we'll be working on enhancing our watershed model that we have for the Great Salt Lake Basin. And then in concert or together with that, we'll be working on creating river basin models that will be similar, identical for each of the river basins, and will allow us to talk to allow us to better understand each of the river basins and how they're connected to each other and to Great Salt Lake. And you saw this diagram before, but I think this just really illustrates the point that we need to look at the watershed from the tippy top to the bottom to the, and so creating some models or some tools that do that is something that hasn't been done at this level and to this extent before. So we'll be diving into this. It's going to take a big chunk of the time. And then the other big task we'll be doing is working on some scenario planning. This is a key feature for both HB 429 and the Basin study from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. But we understand what conditions are on the ground today for Great Salt Lake and in the basin, but what could change? How could things go in the future? What could temperatures be? What could population numbers be? Based on a given population and certain temperatures and certain water levels in an upstream reservoir, what does that mean for Great Salt Lake? How much water would make it to Great Salt Lake in a dry year, in a wet year? So this scenario planning will help us understand water supplies and shortages as we move forward. And then once we do the scenario planning, we're going to try and evaluate the trade-off. What are the trade-offs? So if there are some years of water supply, what are the trade-offs if we send that water down to the lake? How would that look for other uses in the basin? All right, so I mentioned the decision-making track, or the center of the model, is kind of central to this project, and you can see that through the funding allocated for the project. The outer ring of the medallion that I showed you earlier is kind of these other projects that we're suggesting that the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan fund. There are, if you look in section 4 of the plan, there are plenty of projects that are underway that would further help us understand, develop solutions for complications of Great Salt Lake, or help expand on our research base or understand the capacity that we're dealing with as far as data. But those projects are underway and already funded. These are the projects that the steering committee and advisory group really thought would help us answer the question about how to ensure a resilient Great Salt Lake within the time and money that we had allotted. And so just a caveat that these are recommendations. These are the projects that we're recommending moving forward. And the projects themselves are recommendations as well as the costs. So over the next couple of months, we'll be working on moving into phase 2 and really kind of diving in and seeing what these projects will look like. So just another reminder about this big picture timeline. Unfortunately, we can't do this overnight. It's going to take a bit of time. We're working right now on the work plan, identifying policies and projects that are going on. Tomorrow and for the next several tomorrows, we'll be working on the data gathering and modeling, as well as a lot of the research studies and developing a solution, fleshing out some of the solution ideas for Great Salt Lake, and then implementing some of the recommendations that come from the planning tool in 2027 and beyond, and also continuing to build upon the models and the data that we have, because we know we're always in need of more information for the basin to be better informed and make better informed decisions. So that's kind of the highlights of the work plan. And I just wanted to talk to folks and just kind of step you through really quickly what the work plan looks like, what exists. It's really not an extensive document itself. The work plan itself is only about 35 pages, and it's the appendices that are really the bulk of the work. That's where the blood, sweat, and tears really lies. But anyway, the introduction is just that, kind of sets the stage for how we got to where we are. And then the second step, integrating partners and activities, is just really talking about how we can't do this without our partners. We can't do this alone. The Division of Water Resources, the Bureau of Reclamation, we need the basin to be in support and on board with helping us all understand what the challenges are and how we meet those challenges. And then again, just the importance of working through this process with people. Section 4 is really the meat of the work plan. It's the roadmap to action, talking about the steps that need to be taken. And number 5 kind of just rolls us into phase 2. So like I said, the work plan, or the appendices of the work plan, is the real meat of the work. Just taking a second to go over these. The challenge statement that Candice read in the beginning, that took a lot of time and effort to really wrap our heads around. And so we have a whole memo that documents how challenging planning in the Great Salt Lake Basin is going to be, what we're anticipating. So take a moment to look at and see how we're trying to wrap our heads around this picture. The situational assessment, I mentioned we interviewed numerous stakeholders in the basin to get a feel of what their thoughts and concerns were. Communication and outreach plan, how are we going to involve the community in the basin over the next 3 years? That's in there. Short-term opportunities memo. In the timeline, there was a no regrets solution. Here are some ideas that we can put into play today to help benefit the lake. And those are opportunities that may be well in the Commissioner's strategic plan. So we'll be finding that out sooner rather than later. Appendix E is a policy review. It's a technical memo created by our consultant. It looks at all of the laws and policies that have changed over the last couple of years that directly impact Great Salt Lake water and the watershed. Some remarkable work has been done in the last couple of years, and this appendices really highlights a lot of the work that has been done. The technical sufficiency review plan, draft technical memo. As we mentioned, this is the combining of 2 projects, the basin study and the integrated assessment, into one super plan. And this is kind of the crosswalk that helps us ensure that we're meeting the needs of the Bureau of Reclamation while also meeting the needs of HB 429. The gap analysis, that is a big chunk of the work, identifying what we don't know. Well, actually, it identifies what we do know, and then what we don't know, and then what some of the recommendations are. Scoping plan for the water resources planning tool. This is for all of you technically minded folks out there. This is the technical approach, how we're trying to tackle the modeling and the modeling approach for the next couple of years, looking at the watershed basin planning tool as well as river basins. And then scope of work for decision making, that again is that center part of the medal, and the complexity of all of the steps that need to happen in the decision making track required an appendices all on their own. So you'll find that there. And then that last list that I showed you that has all of the project recommendations, just exactly what we're thinking or requesting. A summary, I should just say a summary, of each of those projects is listed in Appendix J. So check that out if you want to learn more about the projects we're proposing. All right, and finally, I have the timeline of this work plan rollout. We put this out on the street in mid-November. Candice kicked that off with the presentation to the legislature. We have this open house this evening. A 45-day period, a 45-day review period that will end on January 8th, and then we'll get started, get moving on the work for the basin plan. We have started in earnest on some of the modeling efforts, data gathering, those sorts of things, but we'll get rolling with some of the contract work in January of 2024. And so I just wanted to end with this thought or this sentiment that we all are living in this closed basin, and so we're all connected really to this one water. We're all dependent on the water in this watershed. It touches us all, it runs through all of us, so while it's used once in the system, it's moved down and it finds its way into a different system, and then one after that. And so I think thinking about how we use water in this basin, and it's not just one river basin or one neighborhood, but it's all of us, and we're all connected to how we use water in the basin, and how we use it upstream impacts all of us. And I think making those connections, sharing those experiences with people is really going to help change how we think about water planning in the Great Salt Lake Basin. And this is going to be imperative. It's imperative not only for the completion of this plan, to be thinking of this as one community, one big puzzle, but I think it's also imperative for ensuring that we have adequate water into the future. So with that, I am going to conclude, and I would like to give special instruction. After this, we'll close down the PowerPoint, and a QR code will appear. That will be your opportunity to ask questions, both for the panelists that you'll hear from and for the work plan. And I would like to say that if your question is not answered during this forum, please check the website. We will go through and answer all questions and respond to comments as appropriate. And then also the whole presentation will be available on the Great Salt Lake Basin Planning website. I'm hoping early next week, so tell your friends, family, they can watch it there. And the last note is the QR code will not be live once this ends. So if you are watching the YouTube video, unfortunately the QR code will not work to ask questions. You can, however, submit comments on the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan work plan via our website. So you're welcome to do that, and thanks everybody for your time.
Thanks, Laura. That was awesome. And I also would like to give a shout out to Jacobs, particularly Jeff Denblaker and Dan Adams from the Langdon Group and Emily Lewis. I know there was a village of people who worked on this work plan, but just a big thank you to all of your guys' efforts. And so next up on our agenda is you guys are all super lucky because we were able to arm wrestle a few amazing people, 6 people, into being on this panel to come to DNR this evening. So big shout out to you guys. Thanks so much for being here and to share your expertise and your thoughts on the Great Lake Basin Integrated Plan, as well as, generally water. I love the first line of this work plan. It says water represents life, and I couldn't agree more. So we're going to dive right in. I have some prepared questions I'm going to ask each of you, and then we'll go to audience questions, and then I've got some rapid fire questions too, because those are fun. So right off, the first question I have is for maybe Tim Hawks, if you could answer this one. What are the biggest challenges that you see in ensuring a resilient water supply in the Great Lake Basin?
Well, thanks, Candice. I think when we think about the challenges that face the basin, they're immense, and there's so many. We could just go on forever talking about them. I thought about 3 kind of interrelated ones that I think are important. One is this idea, and Laura just mentioned it, that we live in a basin and it has a finite water supply. As I think about it, I sometimes say it's like having a pie, and honestly, when it's hot and dry like it's been, it's not that the pie's getting bigger, it's actually getting smaller, it's shrinking. And so if you have any new use within the basin, so if you have a business come in from out of state and it needs to use water, it has to take that water from something else. There's no free water out there, so it's either going to come from another business, it's going to come from agriculture, or it's going to come from the environment. If you build a new home and you want to supply water to that home, it has to come from either another home, somebody getting by with less, or agriculture or the natural environment. So there's no real free lunch. And what that means is that if we can't figure out effective ways to share this precious resource, it quickly devolves into a zero-sum game with winners and losers. And so that's a big challenge. The second challenge is that the resource, this is a huge resource. It touches us in so many ways. I like to talk about, the Great Salt Lake a lot, probably really important to more than half of the people that live in the state of Utah. And yet it's not like you can point to any one decision to explain why the lake is, 11 feet lower than it maybe otherwise should be. It's a function of all of the various decisions that we make and not one single decision. And so we have this public resource that affects us and touches us in so many different ways, and yet the decisions are made really at an individual or hyper-local level, and that's a big challenge. So how do we get people to make individual decisions or local decisions with the big picture in mind? And the last challenge is simply that I think in times of scarcity and uncertainty, we tend to want to retreat to our corners and sort of hoard water, or whatever it is, just sort of hoard it. And also to think that somehow this problem is going to be solved on the backs of someone else. If I'm a homeowner, I don't want to conserve water because I think agriculture shouldn't be growing alfalfa. If I'm a farmer, I'm like, I get cutbacks. Where's your cutback? How are you using less water on your homes and gardens? And so the tendency is to do that. It's a very natural reaction. But unless we can get past it and find out a way to work together, we don't have any hope of solving these other big challenges. If we can do that, if we can get beyond it, we can solve all of them. But I think that's the single biggest, most important challenge, is how do we get out of our own little kind of pockets and figure out a way to make decisions together for our collective good.
That's great. Thank you. It just makes me want to ask, do you guys, and this could maybe be for any of you, have any thoughts on how do we get to that collective good? I don't know. I think that is a big question of how do we do that in the future? Any thoughts right off? This is catching you guys cold, but.
I'll take the first crack. I think we need to have honest dialogue amongst different water users. As Tim said, it shouldn't be seen as a zero-sum game, that we're taking things, if I don't have water for the lake, then someone else doesn't have water for the ranch. It should be that we're coming together to figure out this limited resource that we have within the basin itself. There isn't more water in the basin itself, but we need to come together and have honest conversations and, through planning efforts, figure out how we can ensure that our homes, our farms, our businesses have enough water while getting water to the lake, enough water to the lake to make sure that it's at a healthy level. I think we just have to have frank conversations. We need to have them in Grange halls. We need to have them in agency buildings like today. We need to be able to have them on the street, and we need to be able to have them with decision makers like the legislature. So I think it's that frank, honest information in the exchange of data about what we need to accomplish and how do we get there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you're spot on. And I think being able to look at the risks if we don't, right? If we don't all come together on this. Any other thoughts right off? Marcelle?
Yes, I think that the process or this journey that implementing the plan will take will actually provide a mechanism or a way for these diverse and common interests to come together and try to understand each other's perspectives and do the honest dialogue that Tim Davis has just mentioned. And I think that's one of the important pieces, just helping the process around implementing the plan and how that can help drive a culture of cooperation.
Great, thank you. Awesome. Okay, so next up, I'm curious, Tim Davis, what is the essential tool in ensuring a resilient water supply for the basin? So what do you think we need?
So it'll be redundant. I'll start with we need a plan. So,
We're going there.
Here we are. So, and in fact, there are lots of plans. And as I mentioned, the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office is working on a strategic plan for the Great Salt Lake that will be finalized early next year. But beyond that, there's a lot of amazing work that's been going on to conserve water across the basin over the last few years. And we need the data as well as a model that we can use to be able to demonstrate when saved water that's saved by conservation efforts, makes it to the lake and is able to help us get the lake to healthy levels. And what do we, and be able to measure the direct impact from if Trevor's saving water on his farm and it's going to the lake, we need to be able to track and show that it's getting there and that it's having an impact. If Tim at his house, he's zero-escaped his home and his city is conserving water and through secondary metering or other efforts, we need to be able to show and demonstrate that those savings, the work that everybody's doing is actually getting to the lake and making a difference. And getting us and being able to show that it's moving the lake towards a healthy level.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts right off? Okay, let's go on to the next one. So Trevor, what do you think the role of agriculture is in ensuring a resilient water supply within the Great Salt Lake Basin?
So agriculture in general, whether you're in Utah, if you're in the Great Salt Lake Basin, if you're in anywhere in the Western United States, is the largest consumer of water. And the reason is food takes a lot of water to produce. We all like to eat, we all like to live, and it takes a lot of water just to produce food for consumption. And we recognize that. We understand that we use the most water in the state. We point out that, we produce it so that you guys can live. But we understand that we need to do our part. One unique thing about agriculture is, for the most part, we do have the highest priority in the basins, meaning that our water rights in the prior appropriation system are first in time, first in right. And so we're uniquely positioned that in the event there's a hard enforcement on the lake, according to the laws as they're written now, we would be the last to be turned off. But we understand that that's not necessarily sustainable from a political perspective. And so we're invested in doing our part. One of the things that has been difficult for agriculture in the past is the investment it requires to update our systems. So for instance, today I was out in the field at our largest division structure in our canal company, and they're repouring it, and we're installing some of the most advanced measurement systems and automated gates in the world. And it's behind this old pioneer-esque structure, and we're actually building the new structure behind the old structure, and we started pulling out pilings that had been driven in by the pioneers, and they had taken these great big 2-foot around redwood poles, and they had taken weights and they pounded them down into the ground to hold the original structure there. And so here we are taking those out with a track hoe, and I just thought to myself, man, they were determined to get water where they needed it. And our system is not unique in that fact. There's some amazing ingenuity and just downright grit that went into developing these water systems. The thing I think that sometimes people don't remember is that agriculturalists were the first mass conservationists. I mean, the main funding body that we get funds through from the federal government is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is part of USDA. And so we're very accustomed to being thrifty with the water, stretching it, making it go further. And so this idea of conserving comes quite naturally to us. We're on board. We want to do good things. We have the ability to do good things. And now that the resources are in place because of programs like agricultural optimization and our federal partners at the Bureau of Reclamation and the NRCS pumping money into those programs, farmers are willing and ready to do these things. These are things that they've only dreamed of. The other thing to consider is our second biggest problem, the first being water, the second is labor. And so these advanced systems are making it so that we can be competitive in a not only national but international market. And so we see ourselves, as far as the Great Salt Lake goes and creating a resilient water supply, is that now we have the equipment and the tools to do what we've always done, and that is do more with less. And we really see ourselves as part of the solution to this overall effort to help with the lake. We do need to emphasize that we won't be able to save the lake by ourselves. We need to have the help of every other segment. And I've just been so impressed, particularly with, with all the segments that I've looked at. I mean, there's some really cool things going on with the mineral extraction industry as far as lithium goes, the secondary metering efforts that have gone on. I mean, we've even gone and looked at watershed development as far as our federal partners in forestry, looking at can they manage the forests in a way that's more efficient. And it's going to take that overall effort. If we think that one segment of the economy or of Utahns is going to be able to save the lake, that's just not a reality. And so ag is here to do its part, and we have just been impressed by the efforts of others. And so thank you, and we won't disappoint.
That's awesome. Thanks, Trevor. And I think it's really important that through this process that we don't pit one user against another, that we are all in this together. So it was well said. Thank you. So next, I love this saying that it's important to begin with the end in mind. And so in the end, what will the Great Salt Lake Basin integrated plan provide us with? Or what is your hope of that? Marcelle, will you help me there?
Thanks, Candice. Well, ideally, it will provide the pathway, the resources, the tools, the science that we need to actually help build that resilient water supply, a resilient Great Salt Lake, and a resilient watershed. That's a big ask and a big task, but that's going to be important for all Utahns and the livability of this region, and even from a bigger perspective, hemispheric importance of the lake and Utah to a number of species, particularly birds. And I think that part of the way it's going to do this, these tools, these analyses, this science, can help inform and improve the way we work across jurisdictions, agencies, local governments in making water management or water planning and land use planning decisions, and start looking forward and understand better what are the impacts of the decisions that are being made and how will that affect the lake, how will that affect a water user elsewhere. And I hope that it will help us provide the information that we need to sort of balance those uses, particularly in different situations when climate change intensifies or we're experiencing a drought, and how water sharing may need to occur in those situations. And from the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust perspective, which is co-managed by National Audubon Society and the Nature Conservancy, a lot of the information and science we hope will help also inform our goals, the trust goals, to enhance and protect water flows to the lake, as well as protect and restore wetlands in the surrounding Great Salt Lake ecosystem. So, for example, it's our premise or hypothetical that there are a lot of water flows that are feeding wetlands and the lake. Many of those are return flows from agriculture. We just need to make sure that we understand those and understand how preserving those can be important for preserving the lake and, again, retaining livability in this region.
Great, thanks, Marcelle. So Rick, can you tell us about the importance of federal partnerships in basin planning efforts? I mean, this isn't your first rodeo. You guys have done basin plans in the past, so just curious of your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, thanks, Candice. That's a great question, and I appreciate you guys have already done some of the heavy lifting for me, so thank you for already mentioning us and talking about some of our programs and the funding that we help provide. So from the very, I guess, simple side, we can always help provide funding and opportunities, and it's across the board, whether it's metering, whether it's for environmental work, for a lot of different reasons, all the water smart different reasons, the 20 different programs we have there, and hope to continue that they boost those numbers and continue to put a lot of money back into our local economies to conserve water and to help out in the lake. The Bureau of Reclamation's origination, I guess, was as the Reclamation Service. The intent was to reclaim the arid West. That started in 1902, more than 120 years ago. Our current mission is to manage, develop, and protect water and related resources in an environmentally and economically sound manner in the interest of the American public. I see how that aligns directly with our goals here and with the people that we're sitting in front of and talking to, and to you people hopefully at home. It's our intent, and I think where we've seen some of the greatest synergy is through these partnerships, where our mission really pretty much aligns with your mission. But as we've heard, we tend to get in our own little silos and kind of build our walls and go about kind of creating our own little space to try to make sure that nobody touches our water or our resources. You look at along the Wasatch Back, and you look at the water storage in Utah, and the grand majority of that is from federal infrastructure and from all of our federal dollars that have went into that. Instead of us working against each other and trying to save or however that water, we've got to figure out the ways that through this plan we can work together in a partnership that's meaningful, where we actually can work together and we're not working against each other. I don't think it's very much of a secret that there's times that the state of Utah and the feds don't exactly see eye to eye on everything. We'd love for this to be one of those where we can. Those projects, those federal water projects that are there trying to store and deliver water for ag purposes and for many other purposes, including M&I, have serviced this area for a lot of years. And we have some excellent, amazing partners who know very well how to conserve water and how to make it go as far as it can in our partners like a Weber Basin and Weber River and Ogden River, all these great partners we have, Central Utah, we can trust in what they've learned over the dozens and dozens of years about how to manage and protect those water resources in order to be able to help manage the lake as well. We do want to be a partner in all that effort, and we feel like it's not just in funding, but it's in finding long-term durable solutions that really do last for all of us and for the entire basin. Not just, the money and the other great things that hopefully we can provide, but hopefully it's much, much more than that.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. Okay. So Jacob, I'm curious about what are I don't know, I struggle because what are the major impediments to complete this plan? But whenever I think of impediments or challenges, I always want to think of the opportunities. Maybe that's just the positive side of me. But I'm just curious of, what do we need and from whom to kind of overcome those challenges? So what are the kind of impediments you see, maybe some opportunities, and what do we need to do to overcome those?
Yeah, you bet. So you in your presentation, Candice, you summarized really well the social complexities and the technical complexities. And anyone that opens the work plan, and flips through it, will see a pile of studies in there, along a list of projects that will work through some of those technical complexities that we have. And the state's set aside a lot of money, and Bureau of Reclamation is bringing a good chunk of money that will pay for some really smart people, a lot of really smart people to help address those technical complexities. And so though the challenge is great there, the gaps are, filling in those puzzle pieces that you mentioned is no small task. I have a high level of confidence in our abilities there. It's the social complexities that I think present some of the greater hurdles. And recognizing that as we fill in those gaps, find those missing puzzle pieces and complete the picture, that then we have decisions to make on how the pie gets used. And those decisions, they impact lives. They impact human lives. They impact our feathered friends and aquatic life, and then from those decisions, we have solutions that will help drive towards the impacts that we're hoping to see from those decisions, and crafting solutions that maximize the value that we can get, not only out of water, but I loved Trevor's example of how a solution that helps improve the efficiency of how we're using water also drives additional value in reducing the amount of labor required to apply that water. It's those kinds of solutions that only through everyone coming together to the table with that open mind, seeking understanding, understanding the value of water uses in the different categories of use, that we can come up with those most creative solutions, that we can capture the understanding that we need of how different decisions will impact those lives. And so to me, for someone that has dedicated their career to water management, that's an incredible opportunity, like you mentioned, not just a challenge, but the opportunity to seek out that understanding, to make the best decisions possible, and find the most creative solutions that drive the greatest value, is an incredibly exciting opportunity. Now, I think what we need in order to be able to do that is what we've seen, I think, in the development of this work plan. It's been incredible to meet with these individuals and the many others that you referenced earlier, to see the determination and the focus on the collective good, how people are coming together that way. And I think it takes the public also coming in that same manner and offering, seeking that understanding, really understanding what the impacts of different water uses are, and the value of different water uses, and then forming an opinion and offering that opinion in forums like this, which I think this will be the first of many through this effort. And I know those working on the plan are hoping to just continually learn from those opinions to make the best decisions possible.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jacob. I do fully agree with you. I think the technical piece will be challenging, but the social complexities will be the hardest. So I have one more question before we go to any audience questions. But I just wanted to remind our friends in the audience that you can submit questions or comments utilizing the QR code on the screen or the URL that can be found in the YouTube description of the event. So make sure to submit your questions. So the last question, and all of you are welcome to answer this, but why should I care about the plan? Why should someone care? Any thoughts right off? Oh, Tim's got his light on.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick things off. I thought about, as I was driving in today, I was thinking about this quote, and you've heard probably variations on it, but it says, just because you don't care about politics doesn't mean politics won't care about you. Just because you don't care about this plan, this plan's going to care about you. And so I hope people really understand that this plan, which affects water, which is such a critical resource for our future, very much affects everybody here, everybody who lives in this state. It affects their present, it affects their future, and that for their families. And the other thing I just say is that it's something that we can't afford to get wrong. I was thinking about it, and you can screw up a lot of things as a government, right? You can screw up transportation, and people will be unhappy with you, but life will go on. If you screw up water, right? I mean, it's kind of game over, really. I mean, really catastrophically bad things can happen. It is interesting to sort of step back, and we probably in this state spend about 10 times more on transportation than we do on water. But I just think it's something that it's going to affect each of us, and we've really got to put every effort into getting it right.
Thanks, Tim. No pressure. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on why we should care, Trevor?
I think I'll just repeat what I said earlier, and that is that not one segment can do it. That's why we have to coordinate, is because there are so many synergistic opportunities that I've come across in my position that would have never been there if we hadn't tried to cross out of the normal circles that we run in. And so if we want to be successful, we're going to have to work together in a planned fashion.
Great, thank you. Rick?
In so many ways, the effort itself is a bit remarkable. You usually get a lot more done when you have fewer people in the room. And when you bring everybody to the table, it gets messy, and it gets harder. And it gets harder to sift through all the issues, right? And so, and the priorities and how to work with people. I think it's remarkable that we have this many different entities working on this plan. And it shows that we're all doing our very best to not exclude people and exclude entities and ideals and priorities that others think should be higher than they are now. And I think that's not the easy way to go about it. It's the much more difficult way to go about it. And I think that's why they ought to have a little faith in the effort.
That's great. I remember the quote of, sometimes you got to go slow to go fast, and this is one of those cases. By building consensus and bringing more people to the table, hopefully we'll have a better outcome. So thank you, Rick. Other thoughts? Jacob?
Yeah, I think one reason, everybody cares about their pocketbook. So I fully agree with those things that have been said. I'll just add to that, regardless of the many solutions that are out there, I think all of them will involve using water more efficiently, no matter what the use is. And it costs money most times to be able to use water more efficiently. And, from a M&I perspective, water purveyors, it costs money for them to make their systems more efficient, to make sure every drop, as much of every drop that's taken from a source gets distributed and not lost along the way. And we recapture as much of that water as possible to return it back to the natural environment. And then it costs money for the end users to use water more efficiently. And so it's very important. One of the things this plan will hopefully achieve is propagating understanding of the value that comes from those additional costs, that water truly impacts every aspect of our life, and that by being more efficient in some uses, it facilitates other uses that enhance the quality of our life as well.
Great. Thank you. Marcelle?
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's so important to recognize that this is a stepping stone towards the legacy we leave for future generations, and we all have an opportunity to play a part in that.
I love that. Thanks, Marcelle. Tim?
And then I think I'm just going to sum up what I think everyone said, is we're all in this together, and that I think it's in the very the name of the plan is torturous. It's super long, but I want to focus on just one word in that, which is integrated. That everything we do and everything that we've talked about is integrated through water. And so we're all in this together, and if people have a concern, if they have an idea, that this is their opportunity to weigh in, to make sure their voice is heard, and what comes out of this plan, the tools that come out of this plan.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Okay, so now on to our audience questions. So get excited, panel. So the first one, is this plan looking to change current water law on water right uses, or looking to understand how water ultimately gets to Great Salt Lake? And I think anyone could answer this, so who?
I can take the first crack at it. I mean, I think it's the plan is looking to understand how we use water, and then how we will, how much water we'll need in the future, and how do we balance all the needs that we have for water in the future, including the Great Salt Lake. So it's in that path forward. It's looking for ways, and it'll develop ways that for how do we get to that future that we've identified. And some of those, and we've talked about the technical, some of those will be technical, some of those will be social, and some of those may be evolution of water law over time as a result, but it's not necessarily, it's not looking at changing water law itself and how water rights are used. It's really looking at what tools do we need to get to the future that we've identified.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Tim?
Yeah, just to add in, I think it's funny. It's a great question. Tim and I were just talking about this, I think yesterday or the day before. But it's one thing I would say is it's important to look backward and realize just how far the state has come in terms of changing water law really to allow more sophisticated water sharing, whether you're talking about ag optimization or secondary metering or water banking, any number of innovations all designed to share. And we were talking about how many tools there are in the toolbox. And so the question is, in many cases, how do we use and refine those tools over time? It's not like we need some shiny new toy. We just need the practical experience of working out the tools that we already have.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Anybody else? Okay. So it looks like we have received a lot of questions and comments, which is super exciting. So thank you. We will get to as many as possible. Just a note that if we don't get to your question, we will, or your comment, we will address these. We'll answer them and post them on our website at glbasinplan.utah.gov in the coming week. So stay tuned, but we'll get to as many as we can. So this next question is, what are the biggest conflicts in the Great Salt Lake water?
I'll lead off again. But just quickly, I mean, the biggest thing when you're talking about water for Great Salt Lake, probably the biggest single thing is that under the prior appropriation doctrine, it's last in time. It's sort of the first original use, but the prior appropriation system is such that historically, if you wanted to perfect a water right, you had to divert it out of the natural system and put it to beneficial use, which historically did not include things like brine, shrimp, and birds. And so what you've had happen is, in the eyes of the law for decades and generation on generation, any water that made it to the Great Salt Lake was viewed as wasted. It didn't have any recognized value. There was no tools really to protect it. And so I think the biggest challenge with Great Salt Lake is it's this enormous body of water. It evaporates a ton of water, and it needs a ton of water. And so when you've taken all these water cards, if you will, and allocated them around to all of these other uses, then how do you find the water in that system to bring the lake back to where it needs to be, to healthy levels, even as you meet all the other demands, all the other human needs for water? That's a massive, massive challenge.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts? Okay. So the next question is, getting water, wet water, to Great Salt Lake now is an urgent challenge. What are the immediate actions that are going to come out of this plan ASAP? Tim? Yes.
So I'm not going to focus so much on this plan, but just on actions that we need to take. I think one of the first ones, and I mentioned it earlier, is there's been a lot of efforts to conserve water. I think one of the things we need to do is we need to be able to measure how much of that water was conserved and be able to shepherd that water to the Great Salt Lake. And we then need to work with all sectors to identify areas and ways to find greater efficiency, to find how we can, like Trevor mentioned, how we can help water users take steps now and in the near future. And there's a lot of tools, as Tim talked about, there's a lot of tools that we have, or Marcelle talked about, that we have funding mechanisms to help people make investments to conserve water. Then what we need, whether that's on ag or municipal industrial or other users, and then we need to make sure that that water gets to the lake. I think that's one of the biggest missing links right now of all of our conservation efforts, is measuring and shepherding the water to the lake and making sure that it's getting there, and also identifying how much we're getting to the lake and how much more we need to get there to get it to a healthy level. So I think there's a lot that we can do immediately. I think this plan will enable us to develop long-term tools that will allow us to continue to build on the short-term improvements that we're making right now and the short-term steps that we're making right now.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. And just to clarify, I missed a part of the question. This person says, I'm not against planning, but what can be done now to give us time to plan for the best solutions? And Marcelle, you had your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to add to what Tim Davis was talking about, that the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust has been working on water transactions, voluntary water transactions. We have a lot of partners who've been very helpful in working with us to get approvals on either water donations or leases. And at this point, we have at least 54,000 acre feet that we've transacted in this last little bit over a year. And so we'll continue working on that. And those efforts actually help feed into understanding what some of the challenges are, where we need to improve water distribution and eliminate bottlenecks. And we'll keep working on that. And hopefully there are a lot of other efforts that will actually take place in parallel with the plan, and I don't think anybody's going to stop working on the solutions while the planning is going on.
Yeah, and I'm curious just on this front, one of the big things that came out of SB 277, which is, revamped agricultural optimization, and it created this saved water component. Do you guys feel like that could be an avenue to get additional water to Great Salt Lake if farmers take advantage of that? Trevor, do you want to go and then Tim?
So In my position, I actually move water, which makes me a little bit unique in this setting, in the fact that I spend my day to day, and my staff spends our day to day actually delivering water to customers, to shareholders. And this whole idea that somehow we're failing by not measuring the water that gets to Great Salt Lake has a couple of flaws. And the first is that during the spring and the fall of the year, for most rights in the basins, they are satisfied, meaning that they're fully allocated. So when you do a conservation project of some kind, it doesn't just save water on the 4th of July. It saves water 365 days a year. And so we are so focused on that when we're drawn all the way down to everything being drawn out in priority, everything's being enforced, regulated on these rivers, that we want to make sure the water makes it from, say, Bear River Canal Company to the Great Salt Lake. But all the water that Bear River Canal Company, as the example, is saving when we're in the early spring and when we're in the late fall is already naturally making it to the Great Salt Lake because priority is not having to be enforced on the rivers. And the thing that you have to understand about this is it's going to take time. So we changed a lot of the laws over the last decade, and I have to make a shout out to Tim Hawks and the efforts that he made while he was in the legislature to make that happen. But now that the laws are in place to get water to the lake, now we have the infrastructure behind it that wasn't necessary before that's now needed, particularly the measurement infrastructure, which takes years and millions of dollars to put into place. And so there is tens of thousands of acre feet that's making it to the Great Salt Lake that was previously not because of our effort. Just because we can't point to a gauge somewhere that's measuring that doesn't mean that it's not happening. And so we need to focus on, I love how this plan uses the terminology no regret actions. And we're kind of in that stage of, we know we can take these steps and we know it's going to do good. We may not be able to measure exactly how much good at the moment, but you give us 5 years to get the hard infrastructure on the ground and we will be able to. But let's not pop these solutions in the eye because we can't measure them yet. And so there are some really good things happening as far as actually getting wet water to lakes, and we need to kind of keep that in mind. Now, as far as saved water and agriculture goes, it's pretty complex. I'll be right up front with you. There's a lot of wrinkles to be ironed out. There's a proposed bill right now on trying to help iron some of those wrinkles out that Senator Sandals put together, and I think it's in conjunction with the state engineer, and I think it's a really good step forward. It's going to take some time for ag to become comfortable with that. I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of farmers that are really concerned that individuals from the environmental community are out to steal their water. And having seen the experience of what's happened in California and in Oregon, that's a very credible concern. But we're different in Utah, and I can see a path forward, but you're going to have to be a little bit patient with us as we move forward. You have to understand that ag is not the quick solution. Ag is the long-term and permanent solution, because once we make a change in the field, once we make a change to a canal system, it's there for the duration. I mean, I was telling you this morning, or a little earlier today, about those pine poles, those pioneer pine poles. Well, they've been there for over 100 years. And some of the stuff we're doing today is going to be there that long too. And so we're not going to abandon these principles, these projects that we put in. I mean, our solutions are very durable, but it's going to take a little bit of time. And it's going to take some time for agriculturalists to become comfortable with the idea of saved water. And lastly, there's still a lot of how's it going to work on the ground. So we're going to work through that. It's going to work, but it's going to take a little time.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Tim?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I think one of the reasons we've focused so much on some of these solutions is they're voluntary. And so one of the things to really address the very real concerns that Trevor brings up is to give to farmers not imposed solutions, but voluntary ones that they can participate if they see an economic or other value in doing it, and give them the flexibility, provide them with the tools to do it. I will say that, the legislature invested almost $500 million, $500 million, with about half that going to saving water in homes and businesses, the other half to ag. Clearly an expectation on part of the policymakers and the public. One of the big drivers of that investment was doing something concrete to save Great Salt Lake. So we absolutely have to figure out some degree of quantification to be able to say with confidence that we're seeing water levels improve as a result of that. And I think the bill that Trevor just alluded to is a good step in that direction, because it allows quantification, measurement, approval, so that that water can be identified and moved, again, if agriculture producers choose to participate in that way.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Tim?
Sorry to come back, but I think another tool that we can put in place in the short term, and that was put in place last year by water conservancy districts, is that if we're going to see a big water year again, that they're able to release water from the reservoirs, make sure that that gets down to the lake. Not, as Trevor said, not necessarily be measured and to make it all of that made it to the lake, but we're going to need to, and this ties back into the plan, we're going to need to figure out how to take advantage of wet years, and how to do that in the most efficient fashion in a way that still ensures that people have water at their homes, at their farms, but that we move as much water when we can and as strategically as we can to get it to the lake when Mother Nature gives us a year like we had last year. However, in the short term, if this water year is hopefully a good water year, we have a lot of potential wet water that conservancy districts, other irrigation, other reservoir owners are looking for opportunities to get as much water as they can safely release it when they can, so that can get into the lake. And then as we're evolving tools that'll allow us that to become more strategic over time.
I think Tim makes a great point. The lake is not going to be saved in drought years. The lake is going to be saved because in wet years we act like we're in a drought year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like to say it's like squeezing water from a turnip, right? In drought years, there's not a lot of water to be had. So I think it is optimizing those wet years will get us the biggest bang for the buck. Okay, so the next question is regarding the work plan. So the Bear River is a major tributary for the Great Salt Lake. Agriculture plays a large role in water consumption, and there's a lot of headway in conserving water. A great portion of the Bear River not only supplies Utah agriculture, but also Wyoming and Idaho agriculture. How will the Great Salt Lake Integrated Plan work to involve Wyoming and Idaho in conserving water, and where is it needed? So what I would love to just mention that we have been engaging the Bear River Commission, which has representatives from all 3 states, Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah, as well as the federal chair. And so that is one way we've started to engage with Idaho and Wyoming. In addition to that, we have also reached out to their technical staff to start getting them involved in the modeling, because we're going to be modeling the whole Bear River Basin, not just the Utah portion of it. So we are engaging with Idaho and Wyoming. And once again, we kind of all need to be part of the solution and part of working through that planning process. So I'll just answer that one right off. And any other thoughts or comments? Okay, sounds good. Okay, next up, just one moment, please. Oh, another one for me. Okay, excuse me. So this question is, how will the findings of the post-construction stormwater study that was conducted concurrently with the work plan scoping be incorporated into the next steps being discussed here? So just a little background for those of you that don't know, as the question indicates, we did do a low impact development study that looked at how do stormwater practices that are low impact development compared to more traditional practices, how will they impact Great Salt Lake? So we do have that study completed. I've seen a draft, and I think we're still working to get the final copy, but I think that is really kind of the next step of regulations regarding stormwater and how that's handled. So we'll work closely with the Division of Water Quality to be able to plan out those next steps. But happy to answer more questions in the future. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so the next question, the work plan suggests the construction of a permanent dike on the Union Pacific Causeway in the recommended short-term solutions. How is the state balancing the implications of reducing flows to the North Arm, Gunnison Island, Pelican Colony collapse, increased salinity, increased dust emissions from reduced lake levels, North Arm ecology collapse with the construction of this permanent structure? Any thoughts, Tim? Do you want to take that one?
Sure. A great question. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, the causeway is a permanent structure that's already in the lake and has been in there since the 50s, and it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes I hear people say, well, it cut off, a third of the lake. It killed a third of the living reefs, the bioherms that are there. It's true, but it also saved 2/3 of the lake because having the causeway there allows us to manage the salinity in Gilbert Bay in a way that we otherwise wouldn't have. So in other words, if you took away the causeway today, you'd have so much salt in Great Salt Lake that the ecosystem would collapse. And managing the flow of water from Gilbert Bay, which we call the South Arm, into Gunnison Bay, the North Arm, allows us to export salt strategically to really protect that ecosystem in Gilbert Bay. Now, in a perfect world, everybody would like to see it open and all arms of the lake grow and thrive. Ogden Bay and Farmington Bay are dry for most of the year. There's really 4 arms to the lake, and only one of them is really functioning in a healthy way right now, and that's Gilbert Bay, and it was on the ropes this time last year. So it's a complicated question. Managing dust is a whole different ball of wax, but I do like what Kevin Perry, who's done most of the research on dust transport out of the lake, on the lake bed, says, and that's that the best thing to do to mitigate dust is to get more water back in that lake. It behooves all of us to do that, even as we continue to study it. The best thing we can do is just get more water in it.
Great, thanks, Tim. Okay, I think there's another question. Maybe just one second. Okay. So I have a couple rapid fire questions, but maybe we'll just start with the first one. So this means that you get not like it's supposed to be quick, so kind of short answers. So if you were king or queen of the Great Salt Lake Basin for a day, what would you do to ensure that all water uses receive ample water to meet their needs? Wow, that's a big question.
I need a clarification on this one.
Okay.
So does the king have magical powers or no? So are we talking kings and queens of Narnia or like King Charles kind of thing?
That's a good clarification. I think let's keep it in Utah, so not in Narnia, but let's say that you could change any laws or whatever you wanted as far as that. So we'll give you some latitude there. Okay, Tim, do you want to go first?
I wanted the Narnia
Oh,
power. I was just going to say I was going to make it snow.
Okay.
That's
That's where I was going to.
I like that.
In the ski season.
effective cloud seeding, make it snow.
Okay, sounds good. Trevor?
I think we're making really good efforts in the conservation area, and so I would suggest that, as Tim talked about, we need to make sure we're not trying to stress the pie more, and so I would focus on trying to alleviate the issues on the difference between wet water and paper water.
Great, thanks. Jacob?
So I'll go back to a comment I made earlier. I think, we need to understand how Utahns value water, where they place the highest value in the use of water. to be able to make those most effective decisions. So it's for everyone to seek that understanding of the different values or value in the different uses of water and form and offer opinion.
Well, my magic one would be to legally and financially distinguish between wants and needs when it comes to water. The reality is we have enough water to grow indefinitely in the state of Utah, indefinitely. If we're just talking about water for drinking and for use in our homes, we have more than enough water for that. We have enough water for our farms if we're efficient and smart about the way we deploy that resource. What we don't have enough water for is to live on half-acre lots, water as much and as long as we can with turf that we never use or step on except to mow it. That's a luxury in this state that we can't afford, because if we're going to live that way, something's got to suffer. Back to my original analysis, you're going to have to take that water from agriculture, you're going to have to take it from the environment. But it's just a luxury. That's the one thing where it seems like this is a luxury, folks, we can get by without, and I would love to see something that distinguishes between true needs, which water should be cheap and available, and then just wants, where it should be massively expensive.
Yeah. Great. Marcelle?
Well, just keying off of what Tim Hawks said, in that regard, I think that there's still a lot of knowledge sharing that needs to happen among many residents, and just a recognition that even when we think we have a lot of water, that there are reasons to continue thinking about how we use it in our outdoor landscaping and ways that we can individually contribute to the best or the good of the entire community.
That's great. Thank you. Rick?
The first thing I changed is I wouldn't be panel number 6 person because all the good answers already were taken. So
I'll start with you.
Okay,
first
no, I'm
on the
kidding.
next
That's
side.
okay. No, yeah, exactly. Thanks, Tim. I'm kind of in the same realm as Tim here. In this question, I would change the hearts of the people of Utah to stop talking about ample. We don't have ample. With climate change and with the issues that are going on and with the increase in population, if Kim C. Gardner is correct, ample is not the word we can use anymore. We've got to see it differently. We have to be able to open our minds to a place that remembers that we're the second driest state in the union. We have to be able to use less, and we got to figure out the way to make that happen. And I think that starts with each and every single one of us, from a leadership standpoint all the way down the line. But we have to change how we think about it, because we're not where we think we are. It's not cheap. There's not a lot of it. It's not ample anymore, and it probably won't continue to be ample.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Okay, a couple more questions, and then we'll do the last rapid fire question. So the question I have is, will the Great Salt Lake disappear in 5 years? Anyone want to take that?
No.
No.
No, it's the projections are that Mother Nature gave us a leg up last year with the water year. We were, as Tim indicated, that the Gilbert Bay was on the ropes when it came to the ecosystem last year. The South Arm came up 5.5 feet. We're now at, I think we're at 4192.2 was the last number that I saw. So we're not out of the woods in any way. The whole idea of that it's going to disappear is not really the important question, though. It's more the impacts to the ecosystem, to public health, to our economy, start way before the lake disappears. So we can't. I think I would just change the premise of the question, and to say that we certainly cannot over the next 5 years, next year, this year, we can't be complacent. We can't wait to get back to where we were last year. We were saved by Mother Nature, frankly, and we need to take advantage of the time that gave us. And I would go back to what Trevor said too. Every single year we need to, whether we're in a drought or not, we need to act like we are. And we need to make sure that we're taking steps to value water, kind of, Rick, as you said, we need to value water in everything we do to make sure that we have enough until we get to the place where I'm not saying we turn on the pumps again, but we get to the place where we're out of the woods and we're back in a healthy lake level across the lake, and that would have benefits to the North Arm as well. But so yeah, I would just change the premise.
I just add quick, you get to the disappear in 5 years by taking the kind of 2.5 foot annual loss that we had. And if you just compound that, that's how you get to loss in 5 years. But we had a water year here that delivered about 3 feet if you average it out. So it bought us a couple of years. And the reality is we don't typically lose 2.5 feet each year. And that's why it's unlikely that it would come to fruition.
Great, thanks. Great. Okay. So then the next question: what does this mean for the average Utah resident? And I think this meaning the planning process would be my guess, or this planning effort. Any thoughts on that one?
So I'm going to read it a different way, and I'm going to read it as, what does it mean if the Great Salt Lake disappears? Because I just love that question. I've been called the Lorax of the lake. But I never miss an opportunity just to remind people, it really does matter, folks. It touches the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat in a myriad different ways. And it's not just fear-mongering. Every time a terminal lake has been lost anywhere in the world, and it's happened many, many times, the same script plays out. Environmental devastation, a lot of bad dust. It's bad for ag. It's terrible for local economies. It's just happened again and again and again. So I'm just going to answer that.
Great. I like that.
One thing.
Any other thoughts on the way Tim interpreted it? Okay, well done. So we're going to go to the last rapid fire question. And this one is important because, a lot of the things when we're talking about, Great Salt Lake or water, water's complex. A lot of us probably get headaches from dealing with water sometimes. But sometimes it's hard to think about it. So we wanted to end on, once again, a positive note. And so what gives you hope about water management / water planning in the Great Salt Lake Basin? And this time I'm going to start with you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's the folks in the room. It's the efforts being made through this plan and well beyond the plan, from the universities and from all the different groups who have made significant contributions over many, many years to both bring the issue of the lake up to kind of where it is today, and then to be where we're at now. I agree with you, Candice. I wish we could have been here 5 or 10 years ago. This would have been great. We're not. So let's take where we're at and let's move from where we're at. But what gives me hope about both the plan and this is these people, these panelists, the different groups that are all working together. I think we can get there.
Nice. Thank you. Marcelle.
Thanks, Candice. I think that there is, when it comes to Great Salt Lake, a collective energy and a collective desire to preserve the lake and to see a healthy watershed, because a healthy Great Salt Lake, a healthy Bear Lake, a healthy Utah Lake is so important. And so I think at a level that is intuitive to everyone, there is a desire to help save what we have and protect our future. And I think former Representative Hawks always talks about how much collaboration and how much energy there is to try to work together on Great Salt Lake, and I have to agree with that. I think there really is.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I scribbled a note. It said, with enough vision and hard work, the impossible becomes possible. I thought about JFK said we're going to go to the moon, and people thought he was crazy, and we made it to the moon. When I first started working on in-stream flow, environmental flows in Utah, I was told by a lot of the old guard water folks, that's impossible. But it wasn't impossible. We got there with some time and working together. And so the thing I love most about Utah, even though I'll put off my Lorax hat for a minute, the thing I love best about Utah is we do have this amazing track record of working together. Nobody solves water issues like Utah solves water issues. No other state I know in the nation does what we do, bringing stakeholders together to hammer out compromises. And I call it the pioneer spirit, right? But we have this amazing ability to work together, to take the long view, to sort of set aside our little petty differences and roll up our sleeves and do this hard work. And that's what gives me hope. And that's why I think we can actually come up with a plan that does something meaningful for the lake and for water supply across the board.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Jacob.
Yeah, so I see many things to be hopeful about in this process, even as immense as the challenge is. But I'll just touch on one thing. I see signs, and we gather a lot of data at the Water Conservancy District, and I see signs that people understand, are hearing the LORAC's message about the lake and understand the value of the lake. There's an increased awareness of that, and just very tangible evidence that we see from the data we gather is that residents within our service area, so about 800,000 people within the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District service area, we just went through 3 years of extreme drought as a state. We all know that. Which is part of a 25-year broader drought, and we don't know if we're out of that. It might be longer than a 25-year, but that 3-year period, people within our service area reduced their water use by 20%. Per capita demand went down 15 to 20% from the first year to the third year of that. And what's even more remarkable is that after a banner water year, this last year, the most we've ever recorded precipitation in the state of Utah, people held that same per capita usage rate. That gives me hope. That gives me hope that there is a collective understanding and there is a collective willpower and ability to do great things. There's more to do. We need to hold on to every bit of that next year and the year after and the year after. But it's so significant that, conservation that we were projecting, hoping to achieve 20 years from now, we've achieved the last 2 years. And that gives me hope.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. Trevor.
I agree. It definitely is better to go first. I'm going to have to echo some of Rick's comments, that just the people I've been involved with in this process, and then what Jacob here has talked about. I'm seeing a real change amongst the people that I represent on how they look at water. They're not looking at, as was discussed, as it's not ample anymore. I love that thought. And the same change that you discussed as far as the municipal users making some changes. Farmers are doing the same thing, and that really gives me hope. I mean, the fact that I can have good relationship with environmentalists involved with the lake, it just shows that Utah is a different place. It talked about our system and how we're doing these major upgrades, and we're finding things like wagon wheels and Studebaker hubcaps and wrought iron fences that they used for rebar in these old structures. And we're out there with brand new equipment that's just ginormous, and I'm just thinking to myself, my gosh, they did this by hand. And that grit, I mean, Utahns are made of something special, and that's what gives me hope. And the progress that I've seen shows that spirit hasn't died. We're going to fix this problem.
And to then go after Trevor on that, is even harder. I would just say the wide and broad support and efforts that are going on all across the basin, to whether it's at a neighborhood level, whether it's at a irrigation company level, whether it's city, a conservancy district, businesses. I just think that the breadth and width of the effort to value water, to find ways to do something, and to come together, it gives me hope, and we need to build on that, and we have a lot more to do, but I do think we've got the tools and the momentum and people and the willingness of people to come together. There are things we need to make sure that we're doing in the short term to get us, again, I'm just going to reiterate, to get as much water as we can when we have it. And then I do want to go back to kind of what everyone said. There are things that we need to build on for the long term to make sure that we do have resilient water system and a healthy lake for the long term. And so I'll just stop there.
Great, thanks you guys. So I guess there's one last question. How can folks get involved, whether it's with the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan or Great Salt Lake, or even within, Basin, whether it's ag or municipal? Any shout outs you want to give?
I mean, I just say, having been in that place before, one place to start if you're really wondering how to get your ideas in, and listen, there's ways on the website to do that, right? They can submit their comments there, and that's the best way to get it right in there. But I always would say, talk to your legislators. They're very accessible if you've got ideas and thoughts, and it's kind of their job to follow up and to make sure that the idea gets to the right people. So don't be afraid to reach out to your House of Representatives or your state senator and just talk to them about your questions and your concerns.
Awesome, thank you. Any other thoughts? Trevor?
Well, a backbone of the plan is to get feedback from the watershed councils. And so that's a public forum where it's local enough that individuals can come and voice their opinions. And those opinions, if that embodies what the body of that council feels, it's going to carry some weight up through the plan, because that is the review process as this plan goes along. So get involved at that local level. That's what will make this successful.
Great. So, go ahead, Jacob.
More, getting involved directly in driving immediate results. There's a lot of education resources that are out there on how we can use water more efficiently. And just one example, we have the conservation garden here in the Salt Lake Valley. That is an incredible resource for people to go to. And so I would say just an invitation to everyone to seek out one of those resources, whether it's the conservation garden. There are others in other counties and things. But then as you go and seek that out, look for just one thing that you can implement. My wife and I went to Conservation Garden, which is right outside the front door of my work, and we came away with something that we want to go home and implement at our house. And if everyone joined in, did that, sought out those education resources with the intent to just implement one thing, that's how we'll get to these ultimate solutions.
That's awesome. And I hear there might be some rebates available out there for water efficiency
Yes, there is.
landscaping incentives. Go to utahwatersavers.com, I think.
Yep, utahwatersavers.com.
So yeah, go check out some rebates there. Marcelle, do you have a thought?
Well, I'd also just say there are so many public organizations, as you've pointed out, working on Great Salt Lake or in the watershed, the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council or the Great Salt Lake Salinity Committee that do run their programs or their meetings online. You can watch them or watch them after the fact. And so there are a lot of opportunities to learn and find out what's happening. And so I would really highly recommend that to anyone who has an interest.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, you guys. I just want to give a big shout out to you. Thank you so much for being here and spending part of your evening. Rick Baxter from the Bureau of Reclamation, Marcelle Shoop from the National Audubon Society, Tim Hawks from the Great Salt Lake, Brine Cooperative, Jacob Young from Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, Trevor Nielsen from Bear River Canal Company, and Tim Davis from the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office. Just super grateful for you guys and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise with us. And also thank you for joining today or this evening and joining our open house and providing meaningful questions and comments. We will be sure to address all of them on our project page in the coming week. As a reminder, the comment period for the work plan for the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan closes January 18th. So please submit comments at gslbasinplan.utah.gov. And if you would like to receive periodic updates on the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, please email GSL Basin Planning at utah.gov with the subject line subscribe. And just to make sure I said that correctly, the public comment period closes January 8th. So please submit public comments. So thanks so much, you guys, and we will see you soon. So thanks.